Welcome to DETV Every Woman. I am special guest Nicole Poore, State Senator of the 12th District, and I am here with one of my favorite friends, Marcus Henry. And Marcus, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, Nicole. It's
Absolutely.
good to see you.
Well, great to see you always. I thought this would be a great way for us to have a conversation about our lives outside of the political arena. There's so much that I think people don't know about you and about me, and the life that we live, and just having the opportunity to be able to talk about it, but also more importantly, to be able to share, the resources that are out there and how to reach us and how we can help make a difference for those that might find themselves in the same position that we're in today. So just a little bit about myself. I'm a mom of 3. My son Nicholas is 25 years old. He was diagnosed with cerebral palsy 28 days after birth. And that was a very hard journey for my husband and I. And there are a lot of ups and downs in those first 24 hours. And even now, 25 years later, some days can be a little more challenging than others. But God blessed us with fertility, curing infertility, and we had a little girl 13 months later, and then continued on to have another baby, and our son Luke is 19. And so I feel very blessed to be able to live in the world of disabilities, but also in the typical world, and get to experience everything through the eyes of my children. So Marcus, tell us a little bit about you and your family.
Sure, and Nicole, thank you for sharing. I've been happily married to my wife, Diliana, for 22 years, and we have 2 beautiful children. My daughter, Gabriella, who's now 19, a sophomore in college, and our beautiful son, Alexander, who's 16. Our journey started actually when Alex was 2.5, and he was a normal child up to about 2.5 in terms of his speech, his behaviors. But we saw a regression happen when he was 2.5, not engaging. His speech just stopped. And so the teachers at the preschool kind of brought it to our attention, and so we had him diagnosed. He was diagnosed with autism, and that kind of started our journey till now in dealing with Alex and our whole family. But it's been quite a journey, to say the least, as you understand.
Oh, absolutely. And 14 years ago, it was a different world.
Certainly was. The thing for us is the resources that we have, fortunately here in Delaware, were not there 14 years ago.
Right.
And so the diagnosis is one thing, but to get Alex and these other kids the supportive services that just weren't there, unfortunately. We were traveling out of state a lot of times to get the services for Alex. And it was difficult. I mean, I was working full-time in government. My wife was working full-time in banking.
Right.
And it was difficult professionally on us as well as personally. But we persevered, obviously.
And it really does take a village to be able to get through some of the trials that we've experienced. For my husband and I, my parents and his parents were the main supporters for us. Like you, I traveled all over the United States in healthcare. I never expected my worlds to intersect.
That's right.
Right? My professional world became my personal world, which in some regards was magnificent because I knew the type of physical therapy we needed. I knew occupational therapy. I knew speech language pathology, and I needed to apply it into our own home. But I also wanted to be just the mom. I wanted to be able to rock Nicholas, and I wanted to be able to see him grow and just do the things that my typical children were doing, but understand that life would be completely different for us. So I have a question for you. Tell me, the day, the moment, the time that you found out the diagnosis came, what was the first?
I don't remember the day or time, but I obviously remember the moment. It was devastating. It was just devastating. And you go through these stages of grief and anguish with this. And it's initially for me, and I know for my wife, it was just hard to accept. It must be something else. the diagnosis can't be correct, you know. And like a lot of families, we looked at all the preventative measures or resources out there. Some of it, I have to say, is quack science in terms of how you deal with these kids, but we did all of those things, nothing to the detriment of Alex's health.
Right.
But, and we were fortunate we had the resources to do a lot of research and outreach in some of these programs. But it takes time, and I know you know this, takes time to have that realization that, you know, my son is autistic, my son needs services, and it's going to be a lifelong struggle for these services. That takes time, and my first advice to folks is take time for yourself, have that self-realization, and also have time to grieve personally. Grieve, as you know, grieve.
Yes. Grieve the loss of what you think life is supposed to be like.
That's right.
And this goes across the board. It doesn't happen just because it's a child, right? It happens when you have a parent who's failing. It happens when you have a significant other that might be diagnosed with a terminal illness. All of those things lead you down a different road, and it certainly makes us stronger. I often say, you know, I don't know that I have any tears left. I don't know that I have time for tears. But I know also that I need to at times. But going back to that day, or even just reflecting it, for me, when I often describe it like, you know how you take a picture and you do put it on panoramic, and you can only see the small little piece, but everything else is blurry in the background. That's what it was like for me when the doctors were walking towards me. I knew at the very base of my gut that something was different. That I knew the news that I was getting that particular day wasn't about going home, but going home and what my life was going to look like. I remember nurses crying because my husband and I had become so friendly with the staff at Christiana Care. They had taken such great care of Nicholas. And then I remember a phone in front of me, and my husband was on the other line asking me if Nicholas was alive. And getting through that moment of, yes, he's beautiful, he's breathing, everything's fine. I don't understand what they're telling me. So those moments for me are just embedded in my mind, in my soul. And I can't imagine that other people have not had those same feelings when they're getting the diagnosis or the news that they're not anticipating. So for you and your wife and your daughter, right?
That's important to mention.
Talk about your everyday life and what it takes outside of your job to get your day going and what your day looks like.
Well, obviously it's changed over time with Alex as he's gotten older, but I'm glad you brought up, you know, how it affects your other children. So Gabby's perfectly fine. She helped so much, and because we had to give Alex so much attention growing up, and I know you can talk to that too, she helped, and she was like the best sister to Alex, and I'm over the moon proud of her. And this was when she was very young. She's only, 2.5 years older than Alex. She was supportive, she was understanding most of the time, that the fact that Alex needed less time. Typical day. Now, when he was younger, we were trying to get him what's called ABA therapy, applied behavior analysis therapy. We also did a little bit of occupational therapy. At that time, there was not that level of service available here in Delaware, so we were driving every morning to a provider up in Pennsylvania, early morning, and even coming back and then doing afternoon services for Alex. Very disruptive for our professional careers, but we had to do that. The other challenge in that, though, is insurance, as you well know. Private insurance a lot of times won't cover these things, and we could talk about that later. I was so fortunate, this bears mentioning, that I worked in government. And government, and with working in Newcastle County at that time, was self-insured. So they could go ahead and cover the services that Alex needed. That was critical to me because the cost annually is over $40,000 a year to get these services for Alex. So we did early intervention. We did all these programs with Alex. He's doing well. He's nonverbal, by the way. He's nonverbal. So that's a challenge. So for us, I mean, honestly, we take everything to this day, we take it day by day.
Yeah.
We take it day by day, and we
Yeah.
celebrate the little successes.
Yeah.
And don't get too discouraged with the little setbacks that happen.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And the number one thing for us is Alex happy?
Yeah.
Is he happy?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's, you know, you saying that you take it day by day, I
Mm-hmm.
can't agree more, right?
Yeah.
So but I don't do a lot of planning.
All right.
My planning is for the day, getting through the
Well
day.
said. Well said.
But yet my other two children,
Mm-hmm.
I'm planning in my mind weddings, which I'm sure my daughter's going to appreciate me saying. You know, I'm
Mm-hmm.
planning college graduations for my son, and just all of those
Mm-hmm.
things. But I live day to day, like many of my friends in the disability world,
Mm-hmm.
of what's the next thing to come.
Yeah.
And, you know, when you talked about working in government, when we had Nicholas,
Mm-hmm.
and I've shared this story before, I carried the healthcare insurance,
Yeah.
but now I'm down and out. I'm hospitalized for more than a month in a position called Trendelenburg to keep the pregnancy, which is upside down.
Yeah.
So for all of our viewers out there, I hate to ask you to think about this or have a visual, but everything you do standing up, I had to do laying upside down in order to keep the pregnancy.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a little bit of guilt of being relieved when we finally had Nicholas and thinking, okay, now I can get on my feet and I can solve any problem. I just wasn't anticipating that the problems would still come layered in a way that we weren't prepared for. But for many months, not being able to return to work, because we were in intense therapies. We were being followed by Child Watch. Thank goodness for Child Watch in the state of Delaware.
Very great program.
Absolutely.
It really is. Yeah.
They were phenomenal. Our case manager to this day just was outstanding.
Good.
And so, but how were we going to make it? It was either paying the mortgage or paying Cobra. And so, you know, we made a lot of hard decisions back then of just survival. We were down to one car. My dad spent a lot of time transferring us to wherever we needed to be. And so they were, you know, they were the days that made us who we are today. And I'm very fortunate for my husband because, like you, he has been a fabulous partner. And whereas a lot of families, this does not.
Can I say something about that? And that's such a really important point, Nicole, that we, among a lot of things that we have in common. Your partner, your husband, your wife, your partner, you have to be on the same page with this thing. You have to be on the same page. And that's easier said than done, right?
Yep.
And the fact that your husband and you, it's a partnership basically, day in and day out. Dee Dee and I could not have survived without being on the same page.
Yeah.
And we had family support as well, but unfortunately, and I know you probably know this, statistically, a lot of these end in divorce.
Absolutely.
Just because some of them can't handle this.
Absolutely.
Right? So having a strong partner, and I have to say faith as well.
Yeah.
I do have to mention faith.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
critically important.
Absolutely. You know, I don't want to paint a picture that it's all roses. It is today.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
We're going to be celebrating 29 years of marriage. So yeah,
Congratulations.
so
That's
it's roses today.
Yeah, roses today.
But you know, but again, with children, and everybody knows this, whether it's typical or you have a child with disabilities, you know, there's always those stress points.
That's right.
But back then, like I was like, I don't know that another partner would have stuck it out because me being me, I was like, we need more physical therapy. We need more supports. I mean, I can still remember, which is how I ended up in the Senate, meeting my representative, Speaker Longhurst, at a little kids party. And the only thing she saw was my son. Right? Forget the rest of us. And she wanted to know who Nicholas belonged to. And, you know, because he was just sitting there while the other kids were running around. And as it turned out, her niece, Megan, who has now since passed, was very similar to Nicholas. And so she was just drawn to him. And it was, once I realized who my rep was, I was like, oh, I need your help.
There you go.
I need you to get me this, and I need you to get me that. And for a while there, she said, I think you think I just work for you. I actually have a whole district. But you know what, though? It is probably, I guess that's the way where God led us to where we're supposed to be
That's right.
today, and being able to share our stories,
Yeah.
but also being able to say that, listen, not everything is great. However, every day is that we are focused on making a difference, and not just for ourselves, but
That's
for
right.
other individuals out there. Oftentimes, and I'm sure in your roles and in the role that you're going to have soon, you will, the amount of calls that we get about like, hey, how do I do this? Or how do I find out about Medicaid? Medicaid, for me, has been a lifesaver.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too. Yeah.
Because again, when we didn't have insurance, we were COBRAing, and they said, oh no, Nicholas, because of his disability, will be entitled to Medicaid. I was like, okay, tell me what that means. Tell me, does that offer me anything else? And through the years, we've been really supported by our MCOs. Of course, there's still more to do, but the fact that we have some options and that we can have conversations with them. I just recently did a task force, and I did not have the MCOs, right? So our MCOs are—
That's managed care.
Yes, managed care, and it's your Highmark, it's your AmeriHealth, it's your Centene, and they're the ones that provide the case managers and the supports that you need inside your home, and also externally. But I had this task force, and we were talking about parent care. We're talking about personal care attendants, people needing other supports.
Respite. Respite is critical.
Right?
Yeah.
Respite. Yeah, absolutely. And we'll get to that.
Yes, we will.
But I didn't have them on the task force, right? How did I forget that? How did I not have them listed?
You had a lot on your plate, by the way.
They all showed up.
Yeah.
All three of them. And you know what? They represent different folks for different reasons. But I have to say that I was so pleased with the amount of help and support that they gave. So how do people know to call us, right? Not just about drainage, not just about land use, not just about legislation, but real day-to-day survival help.
Yeah, I mean, there's so much different resources out there for these folks, right? And navigating that's difficult. Dealing in the autism world, the first thing I recommend, is obviously early diagnosis for these kids. And that opens up the world of opportunities for these kids, right?
Absolutely.
And understand there's two different diagnoses. There's the one you get at school, an educational diagnosis with ASD, and there's the medical diagnosis. Both offer up potential services for these kids as they matriculate in school, but also with the medical diagnosis, unlocks those services, both with managed care and Medicaid for these things. And that's changed and evolved over the years, thanks to some of your good work, by the way. And that's critically important. The first thing is the diagnosis. That's the critical thing, to understand where your child is on the spectrum. And that can be difficult in terms of the delays sometimes and get that diagnosis. So please get an appointment as soon as possible. I do have to mention that because of Alex and because of what my wife dealt with, we did start this healthcare practice.
Great,
We have a healthcare practice called Bright Bloom Centers, where we provide these clinical support services for children with autism, focused on what's called applied behavior analysis, clinical support therapy for these kids. We started that because of Alex being frustrated with those services. So we're a provider. We're a provider for this space, but we're more focused on early intervention. Once they're diagnosed, getting these services. Age ranges from 4 to 10, give or take, right?
Okay.
I mentioned that whether you use our services or some other provider, that early diagnosis, and then find this local service available to you through that.
Yeah. So I want to go back. Let's reverse, right? So I think one of the hardest things, and you mentioned it when we first started talking, was the denial phase.
Yes.
Right? And being able to accept that there will be a difference, and how to translate that, especially when you're going into school settings, right? Because the teachers, I mean, they have a tough job.
They sure do.
They have a tough job every single day. And now we're adding another component. And my son's disability is different than your son's disability. And so the needs are different. And so, getting the supports inside the classroom. But more importantly, when you're running through your IEP and someone sees something slightly different than maybe the diagnosis or...
This is very important what you're talking about right there.
Yes, or what you're saying. And there were a lot of times that I had to stay steadfast on saying, at the end of the day, when you go home and you have your break and you deserve your break, especially after the day that you've had, my job's not done. And so what I see is potential. What I see is a kid who beat all odds. What I see is survival. And so I'm not giving up. And I'm gonna take those things and I'm gonna apply them every single day. So while I appreciate your input, then give me some solutions, give me some ways to be able to help you, but I'm the constant. I'm not going anywhere.
And that's the attitude you have to have. You have to be your own advocate a lot of times, right?
Absolutely.
And you have teachers and folks with the best intentions with their IEPs, right?
Yep.
But you still have an advocate to make sure that your children get those services in the schools. There's even legal assistance and professional consultative assistance that can help you in this endeavor.
Absolutely.
I don't do that, but and I would lean into that potentially because it's so vitally important, because with respect to the school services, you're paying for that through your taxes, right? And so they're supposed to make reasonable accommodations for your child with their disabilities, and you have to know what your rights are in these things. And to your point, constantly advocate and make sure they're on point with what their IEPs, individual evaluation plan, excuse me.
I know.
We're getting a little, everybody know what's happening. Yes, but well said.
But let's so I'm in a different level today, right? And at 16, I still had the rose-colored glasses on, right? Like I felt Nicholas still had a lifetime of us getting the things that we needed. And plus, in my mind, he was in a very protective environment. He graduated from William Penn, the best graduation moment of my whole entire life. I wish I had a clip because I would share it. There wasn't a dry eye in the audience.
I think I did see that on Facebook, by the way. I think it was on Facebook.
It was.
I remember I texted you about that.
Best moment of my life. But it was because it was a milestone too, right? Of course, but now we're 25 and life is completely different. The adult world, totally different world, right? And so I know that there are a lot of viewers that are going to be listening to us. And so it's not just our younger children, it's when you transition. And again, going back from cradle to grave to folks that are, seniors and they're transitioning in their life. Like these services they're variable, right? And depending on what your needs are. And I think we could probably do 10 more episodes of this.
Easily.
Not touch on everything.
And it bears mentioning, so unfortunately, a lot of these services, I'm in early intervention with our program, but a lot of these programs and funding stops when they hit adulthood. And that's the problem, right? So let me say this, part of this also is really stringent financial planning, financial planning early on in terms of how you're gonna care for your child, and then when they're adult, how you continue that care for those kids. But also in consideration of you're getting older and how you're going to care if your child needs your, how that's going to be provided for. And there's not enough time in the show to get into that, but just being vigilant, talk about these things carefully in terms of with your family or relatives, how you're going to care for your kid if something happens to you, unfortunately, too.
And there's, there's something else that, as you're talking about this, I know when I'm outdoor knocking and I'm talking to constituents, I am a huge advocate when it comes to the lifts, right? You see in front of people's homes, they have, the wheelchair ramps. When I see them in metal, I want to lose my mind. I want to lose my mind because guess what? When it's hot out, you can't touch the handle. It is so hot. If it's snowy out, it's like an ice rink trying to come down. Plus, what people don't think about and what we need to rethink, and this is, I talk to the MCOs about it, I talk to anybody I can about it. When you put a ramp at the front of the house, you advertise that there's vulnerability in that home.
That's right.
It's a game changer for people.
It is, it is.
And we need to be more aware, more protective of folks that need services, but we need to be more creative about how we're getting people in and out of their home.
Accessibility is critically important.
Huge.
Let me say this though, and you brought up something that I always think about, and I know you do this. It's that we always have to educate the public too,
Yes.
and how to deal and interact with a person with disabilities. And it's gotten better over the years, right? Understanding of these things, but we're still not quite there. And I have to say this too, in the African American community, sometimes we have a lot of denial on things. Like with my son, when he was first diagnosed, he was exhibiting these behaviors. It was like, oh, he's just bad, or he's just you know, he just doesn't want to listen.
Right.
I'm like, no, that's not it at all, right? Yelling at him doesn't help, right? You have to understand what's happening here. And so we're constantly have to educate the public with this thing. And that's critically important. And there's advocacy groups out there that can help in this, you know, Autism Delaware, Chimes, and others that you're aware of. But it's this constant need for education of the public, right?
Absolutely. And as I was saying, when you transition to adulthood, right, where do you go? What do you do? For us, I am so lucky that Easter Seals, and let me just tell you, we graduated and then went into COVID. So Nicholas became like, oh, this is fabulous. Everybody's going to wait on me 24/7, and I'm safely at home. But I know you feel the same way that I do. We want our children to be out in the public. We want them to have as much of a typical life as possible. Accessibility, whether it's going out to eat or just like today, Nicholas is going bowling. I'm very excited for him. He's very excited.
That's awesome.
But the reality to that is making sure that, you know, one, we have the accessibility, that we're providing these opportunities, but also knowing that we do have to make the education. We have to let people know that acceptance comes in many different forms. And
for me, speaking with respect to government's role in this thing, you know, the mandates or the initiatives we put forth expressly with the private sector to make these accommodations is important. But from Newcastle County's perspective, you know, we offer up a lot of different programs and services for youth, summer camps, recreational activities. One of the things that I'll want to lean into after this run for office is done, successfully I imagine, is to make sure we're doing greater outreach and program delivery for this population, and accessibility for this, with the camps, with the recreation activities, that we're making these accommodations for these kids so they enjoy these things. Right?
And we do have great programs out there, right?
We certainly do.
So Nicholas is spending his time at Easter Seals, and they're doing an amazing job. But
wonderful organization.
It is. But again, you getting through COVID and making sure that we are providing the safe environment. I can't wait to work with you, and you know, I know we personally have these conversations, but I'm so glad that we are sharing who we are and what we do every day and what we want to do for the public, but more importantly, making sure that people know that we're accessible.
That's right.
So when they call us and they say, you know, my mom had a stroke and I don't know what to do and I don't know the services she's eligible for, that we can guide them. We can say, sure, you know, let's talk about the Medicaid avenue. Let's talk about, you know, services that you might need in your home. And do you need some accessibility in your home? What does that look like for you? Because I am a true person that believes like Nicholas will be with me forever and ever.
I feel the same way about Alex.
No place for him. However, everybody has to choose the journey for them and their loved one that best fits their life and their needs. And so we also have to make sure that we are complementing services to be able to help folks that have to choose a different pathway.
Very well said.
Absolutely. It's, you know, it's probably one of the hardest things. It's different than sending your child off to college.
Right.
But at the same time, again, I keep repeating the cradle to grave because while our lives started in this world because we had a child, there are other people that have not needed to access healthcare, have not needed support groups or outside services, and something changed whether it be an accident,
Right.
whether it be a traumatic event because of a healthcare situation. It's game changing for
It
people.
is game changing, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to say it again, when folks offer help, family or friends,
Yeah.
take it.
Take it. Oh,
Please
yeah.
take that
Yeah.
help, right?
Absolutely.
And we referenced respite care earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Respite, there's programs out there that, it can be an arduous process in terms of applying,
Yep.
but it's such a life-saving initiative to give parents a few hours, a break
Yeah.
to just live their lives and take advantage of that. But when family offers up help, take it, please. And take time for yourself.
Yeah.
Take time for yourself till you have to do that, because you have to be mentally strong and well.
Absolutely.
And with your husband and with my wife and your other family members,
Yeah.
to have that time as well.
Absolutely.
Right?
It is, there's definitely, I think sometimes it's hard for us, right?
It is hard for us, I can tell it.
Hard to
same way.
turn it off.
Yeah.
Because it's who we are, but at the same time, I just know that life is good the way it is. It's just a different type of life than maybe I originally thought, 30 years ago, for sure.
I do have to say this, and this is the God's honest truth. Because of Alex and the things we go through, it's made my wife and I better people.
Yeah.
More thoughtful.
Absolutely.
A little less selfish.
Yeah.
A little more caring. And it's definitely made me a better government official.
Yeah, absolutely.
It really has. And I think it's obvious for you too.
Yeah, I like I said, when my professional world became my personal life, but I will say, the boy that I married at 21 and a half, to the man that he is today, there's just, I watch him lift Nicholas, I watch him, and my husband, which a lot of people don't know, but shortly after I got elected, my husband got diagnosed with cancer. And so we really were fighting many different battles at that point in time. And you know what? He just was like, I'm going to be fine. We're going to be fine. And having that attitude, that willpower to push through. And today, like I said, it's nothing. He will lift Nicholas, he'll move him. When I say, oh, I don't know if we can do this, he says, oh, we can do it. We can do it. We'll get it done. Yeah. And it's such a relief having that, that type of support, to know that there's nothing outside of our reach. Might take a little bit of extra work, but it's good. It is definitely good. So I
By the way,
appreciate.
that's remarkable.
Yeah,
you guys
is.
are remarkable.
You know what? He is.
That is.
I'm lucky.
You are.
I'm lucky.
He's lucky too.
Well, what I want to say is that I appreciate that you decided to take the time to come talk about this, and
Thank you.
I appreciate how authentic you were, because one of my biggest questions was wanting to hear from you the moment that you found out and how it made you feel. And I think it's important for other folks to know that, because women, we talk about things, right? We want you to understand how we're feeling.
Yes.
And I think oftentimes, coming from a man, right, we want you to be strong, and we want you to be vulnerable, but we can't have you be too vulnerable because we need your strength. So I appreciate, how you explained those few minutes, that early time, but also just the perseverance of where you indeed are today in getting this done.
And I'm glad you said that too, because I have had to be strong, but my wife is very strong as well. And that's that partnership that we're talking about, because, and this, there are those good days and there's bad days and there's just bad times sometimes. And sometimes you need to pick each other up, right? Sometimes you have a bad day, or she does, and we pick each other up.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And you touched on also, just the other kids, right? Like we kind of brushed through that.
Yeah.
But that's a whole nother, I was just talking to somebody the other day who has a set of twins. And she was saying how the one twin has disabilities and the other twin does not, and how she has them separated. And the one twin just recently said, no, I want to be with my brother. And she said, we've opted not to, because as they're getting older, he wants to be the protector. And so she said, we just want to make sure that we are giving him his space. And I think that that is important. So Marcus, talk to me about, we started to touch on this about, our typical kids versus our children with disabilities. Tell me how that works in your household.
So my daughter Gabriella is 2.5 years older than Alex. He's 16, she's 19. So growing up, it was important that we gave Gabby her time as well. Her sports events, her academic endeavors. It was very important for us. Her birthday parties, her friends over, spending the night, and teenage girls, as you know, are something, right? But she's and I'm so proud of her. Just the way she takes care of her brother, and just mindful of him, because it's tough. It's tough. And I have to say this too, please take advantage, families, your kids, of counseling opportunities.
Yes.
When you need that.
Yes.
Mental health is critically important, and we need our supports too, not just in dealing with our disabled children.
Absolutely.
And so, with my wife and I and Gabby, we always had that available. But Gabby had a really, I think, wonderful life. She's so good to Alex. She's doing very well in college right now. But long term, I do want to make sure that goes to the financial planning we talked about earlier, that I don't want Gabby to feel obligated that she's going to be responsible for Alex. God forbid something happens to us in the future. But she wants to anyway.
Right.
But that's why this financial planning is so critically important for us. But the dynamic with Gabby and Alex has been a godsend for us in so many ways. I'm so proud of her. And the rest of my family too. My mother, my brother, their cousins. They all chip in and support. His cousin Miles watches him on the weekends, does respite care with him.
Nice.
Family steps in and helps. That's why it's when I said earlier, when they offer help, take it. And they're happy to.
You do have an amazing family.
Thank you.
I have a personal relationship with your mom, and early on
She cares about you very much, by the way. I do have to say that.
She is an amazing woman and an
Mm-hmm.
amazing mentor.
Thank you.
But early on, we would have conversations, and she would ask me from the grandparent perspective versus the parent perspective.
Right.
And I would tell her, we don't survive without you. We don't survive without just the little things that our parents can provide during some of the toughest times. It's a safety net for us.
Sure.
And so, but she is a very unique and amazing woman. And when you talk about making sure that Gabriella has everything that she needs and the supports and the opportunity of counseling, I think that's one of the things that has also changed in years, right?
Much better. Much better. It wasn't there before.
Absolutely.
And insurance recognizes this now too. So insurance will cover a lot of this in terms of family support counseling and individual support counseling as it relates to kids with disabilities, people with disabilities.
And the legislature, with literally the Speaker Longhurst, was emphatic over the last couple of years of making sure that we put counseling inside the schools, right?
Thank you for that, by the way. Thank you and Speaker
Longhurst.
Well,
it was the senators, the representatives, but Val definitely had the foresight, of course, living in this world as well. But the fact that we are doing that and being able to talk about it, because, as I was raising Nicholas, you didn't talk about that part of it because you had to stay strong. Right. And you had to teach your children how to be strong and get through some of these things and also navigate the outside world. Right? And so, and the acceptance of your sibling, like you said, the birthday parties, when you have kids at the house and then you have the child in the wheelchair, that's just, something's a little different here. Right. It's all of those things, but you guys have done an amazing job.
Thank you.
And I think collectively, I think our state is doing better. Again, let me make no mistake in saying this, we have so much more work to do.
But we've made a lot of progress over the years.
We have.
And we talk about respite care, we talk about managed care in
Yes.
Delaware being able to cover these services medically.
Mm-hmm.
Other states don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
Other states, that's not available.
Yeah.
So kudos to Delaware, but to your point, we can always do better and continue to evolve.
Yep.
As a state
Yeah.
in these types of coverages.
Yeah,
But Delaware doing pretty good so far.
Absolutely, I've worked with some really great people across the state, and also just talking to people about the needs. And you know, we have a population. Our population is growing.
It sure is.
Our retirees are growing in the state of Delaware.
One of the fastest growing segments of the population, the senior population.
Absolutely, absolutely. So we're going to see a lot of changes, I think, in the coming years. And I know with your leadership and with other leadership in the state of Delaware, we're going to do just fine. So
I totally agree.
yeah. So thank you so much for spending time with me,
my dear friend.
and you know, just talking about your story and let me share mine. And hopefully we've made a difference to anyone out there that needs supports. Please know that Marcus and I are here for you. And there are so many resources that you can tap into, and we would be happy to share them with you. Thank you.